Welcome to the second attempt of an early access episode of the Bithell Games podcast. I'm Alexander Sliwinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell. Hello.
And what? Oh,
okay, sorry, let's throw it off. I'm sorry.
Each week we'll talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. As this is an early access episode, we're also going to try to have guests. Hopefully next week we'll get a guest on. Also, time's a bit wibbly wobbly here because we say weeks, but the iTunes population when you are putting a podcast up for the first time can somehow condense or expand time. So you might actually be listening to 3 episodes in a row or 2 episodes. We don't know yet. But what I can say is that the first episode is weaving its way through iTunes right now. So this will probably be up at the same time the first episode. So you got a back-to-back pilot. I guess it's not a pilot.
Double bill.
It's an early access episode. But yeah, this week we'll start with the casual. What have you been playing? So Mike, what have you been playing?
What have I been playing? I've gone back to Tomb Raider, the most recent one, which I've forgotten the subtitle. Was it The Rise of the Tomb Raider, or The Dark Knight Tomb Raider, or Tomb Raider Revengeance? I'm not...
Lara in Therapy?
Something like that. Well, that's not come up yet. I guess I've not gotten to that bit, like that framing device, like as I assumed it would do the kind of the Hitman thing of it being a flashback.
I thought that was the opening.
If it is, I've not noticed it. Unless it was. Now I'm wondering if I just kind of no. It's actually, this one's really kind of solid structurally from a narrative point of view. You can really tell that it's that thing, and actually I've seen Rihanna, who's the writer of, or I guess one of the writers on Tomb Raider, talk about this publicly before, that so often as a writer on a big AAA game, she's brought in at the last minute to just explain why all of those places are being visited, and maybe later they'll delete one of those levels and suddenly the whole of the narrative's broken off. It feels like this is much more writer led, it's a story that is unfolding in a really satisfying way. So that's cool, but it's good. I'm having a good time with it.
But I feel like wouldn't Tomb Raider, wouldn't Lara at this point be, I mean, I would think of the same way as Miller sort of went at Batman. There is a history there. There is you're not creating a game around, well, I mean, you are creating a game around a character, but there is a story. There's an expectation to Lara Croft. We have an idea of who she is and what she represents and what she's supposed to be doing, which is why the sort of traumatized individual made sense for but so the whole trauma thing hasn't occurred yet?
It's not really come up. I mean, they it's made very clear, whereas the Nathan Drake thing is that yes, he's murdering lots of people, but he's just a charming guy who's just in the wrong place at the wrong time, so he gets away with it. Tomb Raider very much is trying to tell you that she's doing it because she has to, it's a survival thing, which in fairness, she's flown out to this country. She's British. She's decided to be in whichever part of the world she is in any given level. So that does, there's that whole Ludo narrative dissonance thing that was very fashionable to talk about a few years ago. That's definitely there. But it works. They've tied it to the family. I think the fact that they've rebooted means that while I agree with you that obviously there's definitely a Lara Croft expectation, it's not tied down by law. We've had, the first game of this new rebooted kind of franchise was pretty simple in terms of the lore itself and the story and the world and the characters. This one kind of, you get more of a sense of, it's very focused on the backstory, the relationship with the father. There's some good stuff there. I'm digging it so far. My only complaint, if I have any complaint, is that it's been the kind of my refrain all this year. It's a bit too big. It's massive. It's got this kind of open world aspect to it. I'm constantly having notifications telling me I'm missing content. And I kind of really want it to just be a 10-15 hour roller coaster.
What do you mean it's telling you that you're missing content?
So one of the things it does is, you have your kind of linear progression, and this is similar to the last one, you have these tombs that you can find, and each is a cool puzzle, and they're really good. They're really nicely designed. They're kind of old school Tomb Raider. They're much more about kind of figuring out a puzzle through an environment. And you'll just get a notification going, there is a hidden tomb in this area, explore to find it. And, often when I'm playing games, I've got, half an hour gap between two meetings. I just want to, lay loose. And I don't want to go and look around and find this thing. So I kind of progress past it. And you can always go back, obviously, and experience these. But there is this there's always this feeling with it. And I'm sure it's intentional that it's like, just leave the beaten path. Go and do your own thing. It's like, no, I'd really much rather you just kind of put it all on the beaten path for me. It's one of the things I really admire about Uncharted is you can sit down for 20 minutes to half an hour with Uncharted and have a massive kind of proper AAA quote unquote kind of experience in a very short space of time. And as someone who's getting a bit older,
but Uncharted comes from the Call of Duty school of thinking, where it's like you're there for the movie, like you're there.
Yeah,
but I would think Lara comes more from the school of exploration, like
for sure. No, absolutely. And I think the weird thing that's present in the Tomb Raider games since the reboot, and they are fantastic, like I don't want it to sound like I'm genuinely a massive fan, and I've had really good conversations actually about like the game with the people who made it. They're a really cool team. But I think the problem from the one aspect that I'd love to see them kind of resolve is it feels like it wants to deliver me an Uncharted experience, that kind of big epic roller coaster ride. But it also knows, as you say, there's that legacy of the exploration, and I want it to fall into one of those two camps. And I feel like I'm getting the roller coaster ride, but I'm also aware that there is stuff off to the edge. It's kind of like if you're watching, like for me, the second a director's cut of a movie exists, I no longer want to watch the normal version because it's like I'm missing out. There's meant to be scenes here. There's additional things. There's a director's cut of Gladiator, which is demonstrably worse than the cinematic release, but I can't watch the original.
But that's the thing. Director's cuts, and I'm sure there will be people who will strongly disagree with this, are demonstrably worse.
Often flabby, yeah. But I'm a completionist, or what? I'm worse than a completionist because I'm a completionist without the time to complete anything. So I kind of just constantly have this kind of midlife crisis with every game I play, that I hit a point where I'm like, I can't. I'm never going to experience everything this game has to offer. It always makes me feel a bit sad. Because but that's, to be honest, that's so much. That's just being a.
Well, that's why you had to give up on The Witcher, right? Like, you felt overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah, no, The Witcher was a classic example of a game where, I spent 10 hours on it and had an amazing time, and it's a beautiful game. I love the art direction, love the storytelling, love the design, love just everything about it, but just hit that 10-hour mark and thought, I'm going to have to give another 70 hours to this.
Which I blissfully gave to that.
Yeah, but I get really restless.
And we'll do our Game of the Year episode, sometime in the next few weeks. But yes, don't be surprised when Witcher is high up on my list.
The thing is, I admire it massively. Like, it might be high up on my list. Like, even though I never got out of, like, I think I got to I can't remember the name of the character, but the castle you get to, like, after that first world. And I just, unfortunately, I get restless. I can't, like, when I was a teenager, I'd sit down and play, like, Knights of the Old Republic for, 4 hours straight and not even think about it. But as an adult, like, I just can't ever give more than an hour to a game because I just start getting, I need to go and achieve something. I need to go and do some work. It's a character flaw. So what about you? What have you been playing?
I continue my quest across the
to build the sugar empire. No, it's not sugar empire. It's an adhesive. It's a glue empire. Right?
My glue empire.
Nice,
in Fallout 4. I have now figured out how to make my glue empire. I've got circuit boards coming in at a good clip.
Good.
I have begun connecting all of the sort of establishments in the Commonwealth to connect to each other. So last night I found a tarberry bog which is a cranberry bog.
Of course, yeah.
Run by ghouls. And I will be hooking them into my infrastructure so that I can have a consistent quantity of tarberries available to mix with my mentats, and therefore granting me it's not grape. Is it grape? I think it's grape mentats. No, it's tarberry. What do they call it? I can't remember now. But give me that specific mentat that allows me to see through walls. So everyone shows up as a purpley cloud. So I've got like my detective vision going on.
Which will help you find more customers for your glue, right?
Well, it'll allow me to procure more glue off of potential customers.
Okay,
who will
with your gun.
Right, who will no longer be with us after I procure it from them. But that's what the recruitment beacons are for, along all of my established towns, because they will come and they will purchase the glue from the people that I procured it off of. And so the cycle of life continues.
This stuff is so profoundly massive.
It's so huge.
Terrifies me.
I want to talk about the game and what's going on in the game, but talking about the stuff that's happening at this point is just, I think I've got to be at least 60 something hours into it, and anything I would talk about at this point is just a spoiler. Like there's nothing I can talk about that is happening in the game other than establishing my little Commonwealth colonial infrastructure.
So is that, my question with that stuff is that something that the game's economy kind of requires you to like have a business or something, or is this something that like players could absolutely ignore and just be playing it through, on the action RPG level and just never dip their toe in this stuff? How heavily does it encourage you to do this?
I would say you can live without it. On the flip side, your settlements do get attacked, and I guess you could just let your settlers die, but that's kind of against my personality type.
You're a hero. You're a hero.
So I will show up and I will defend the camp, but then I take it in my brain to the next step of, well, why should I show up at the camp and put life and limb at risk and potentially die? And even though there isn't really any penalty for death, when I could establish a defensive perimeter around every single one of these colonies, get all the food and resources that I need them to do and support me. So then when they do eventually get attacked, I show up and just let the bad guys run into the machine guns and the rocket grenades and all that stuff. So yeah, you can avoid it, but your brain is going to do that thing where you want to. It's the Metal Gear thing. You feel if you don't do this, you're playing the game wrong.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the Metal Gear thing of, if you do not play that game stealth, well, you don't have to play it stealth. No, I hear what you're saying. But if I don't play the game stealth, I'm playing it wrong.
That was always the thing with like Hitman as well. I thought was a really good example of a game where it totally could be played as a third-person shooter, but like, yeah, it clearly wasn't designed with that in mind. This stuff is what scares me about us setting off an office, that I'm going to walk into the office one day and you're going to have built a defensive perimeter of some kind, or just be selling glue to the employees. Like it'll be a front for some crazy business.
Well, if it makes them work harder, why not? I've got my little side glue business going on. Why do you keep selling glue to our employees? No, I don't know.
They just love the stuff.
Is there anything in the glue? I can't comment on that.
It's the point where you realize that the game side of the business is more of a hobby for me than the actual. It's actually the glue empire that's paying the bills.
No, the thing about Hitman, I don't know if you do this as well, but with Hitman, unlike Metal Gear, so with Metal Gear, when things go off the rails, like I'll just take out the machine gun and just go to town, and it's like, okay, it's over. I might as well, at least finish the mission, even if I'm not going to do it elegantly. In Hitman, I will load the most recent quick save.
Yeah, exactly. And Hitman as well knew that, which is why it kind of rations out those saves on higher difficulties, which is cruel but brilliant. I think the most recent Metal Gear was the first one where I accepted, pulling out the machine gun as an option. Like, I think the previous ones, I was much more, reset check from last checkpoint if something went wrong. But with the new one, it kind of felt like the game wanted me to be sliding between, stealth, combat, like it wanted me to be playing on that sine wave.
Yeah, and it was far more sandboxy than any of the other ones ever were. Like, the other ones were a story, so you felt like you were breaking the story if you did anything other than stealth, whereas this one...
Until Swit Twin Snakes, where the cutscenes broke the story. Just like jumping on the top of rockets. That was awesome. I love Twin Snakes.
Are you playing anything else? Any other little random things that you're doing?
Right now, I just continue to play Threes every other day. Like, Threes is the closest I've ever come to kind of that hobby game that people always talk about, like that game that you just go back to, and Threes is just now the background noise. So there's one game I saw, it was actually like, it was one of the games up for an award I was judging, and I think in the final awards it came second or third, but it's brilliant. It's called Cobe the Gallery, and it's a really simple mobile puzzle game.
Cobe?
Cobe, C-O-B-E. And it's really small.
Is that a word?
I'm not sure it is a word, but it's about cubes. So I think they changed the letter basically.
You keep talking, and I'm going to look up if that's a word.
I'm going to look up if that's a word. It's probably a massively offensive word somewhere. So it's a really nice simple puzzle mechanic. Basically, you have a screen, and on that screen, it's all broken into tiles, very small squares. And you can basically draw color from any edge. So if you've got, a red on the left, green on the right, you can drag the red across and fill the screen with red. And you have a number of moves, and your objective is to fill the screen one color. So obviously, as you maybe have some steps going up the screen, and there you have to go, well, I can only drag one edge, so I'd have to do multiple, which would slow me down. But if I drag in this direction, that kind of the current will move. It's a really hard game to describe, but it's a very nice kind of train game. It's a very nice kind of fiddling with it while reading the newspaper kind of game. So I'm having fun with that one. That one's I'm slowly working my way through as I travel around London.
So Cobe is a cosmic background explorer. It is a NASA satellite launched in 1989 to map the background microwave radiation from space in search for evidence of the Big Bang.
Oh, I don't think that is in any way related to the game, but if there's a lesson here, it's that as an indie dev, Google the name of your game.
So we are currently going through. Is it the pitch process? Is it?
It's pitch / kind of pre-production. So we're at that early stage. We have, and I think we're both going to spend a little time here, like avoiding certain words. But we have an idea. We have a thing we want to make a game of. An idea that we want to make a game of. And we think it's cool on like a conceptual level, but nothing exists for it. So in terms of starting a project up, you often go through kind of a pre-production stage. If you are involved with external partners, then there's pitching involved in that. You kind of have to explain your idea effectively to other people. So that's the stage we're in with one of the things that's bouncing around. There's a few things bouncing around, but one of the things is kind of a larger project that we're in pre-production on.
And part of this pitching process is we have to put a document together, and part of that document is getting really pretty artwork.
It's a sexy bit of the process, right?
Is getting a real pretty. And very recently we put out a call on social networks that we were looking for a concept artist, and we received
170 people.
Actually, it's over 200 now.
Is it really over 200?
Yeah, because we continue to
accumulate them.
Because
I pulled the ads. I removed like every trace of me. Oh no, I think actually probably my blog's still up, isn't it? That'll be why. Yeah, we got like crazy numbers, and it was a solid 2 days I spent like going through each and every single one, kind of comparing, contrasting, working out like, you know, who had the very specific skill set to kind of work on the thing we were thinking of putting together. But it was tough, man. The quality out there is astonishing.
No, looking at the talent that is available, it's like
and
looking
available to us, right? That's the thing
right.
that gets me is like I know there's great artists out there, obviously, but like that we could just put out a call and get people was astonishing.
But the amount of talent out there is really like looking into the Matrix. Like there's, we had such a tough selection process of, and I mean when it really came down to it, it got hard. Like at the end.
That was like a 3-hour phone call. I think me and you sat on Skype. It was late one evening here, so probably like afternoon your time, but like I was tired. Yeah. And we were just kind of, yeah, but this artist can do this, yeah, but this artist can do that. And just, yeah, there were a number of people. It was tricky. There was much process. But yeah, we found someone who we're working with now. He's been on the project for 2.5 weeks at this point. Well, no, actually slightly less than that, nearly 2.5 weeks. And is producing very cool work, which probably no one's going to see for a long time.
So now talk a little bit about what that procedure is like. So we obviously we went through all these portfolios. We worked out what we were looking for this project, and you know, made an offer, they accepted, and they've started work. So I've now seen many different types of concept art flowing through that are going to be part of this brochure, I guess what we would call it, that we're putting together. So it starts off with what's the first thing with all the different people?
Well, this is where it varies. So there's two things going on. This is why I'm, you know, quite eager to split the two. There's pre-production and then there's pitching. Now, pitching is about creating, you know, beautiful, sexy images that impress people, and you know, really capture like that final, like what this game's going to actually look like and what mood it's going to set and what tone it's going to have. But pre-production,
please let us make this thing.
Basically, yeah, like you're screaming at the universe to let it happen. But then pre-production is much more the actual work. Like pre-production is the kind of working out solving problems, as in most development jobs. There is a problem that needs solving, and pre-production is about exploring and finding that. So the process here was, so far it's been, you know, I obviously have an idea of the story I want to tell and what the design of the game will be and what needs to happen from a game perspective. Probably a good example here. To make things a bit easier, let's talk about volume for a moment. That's probably because I could actually talk about volume. So with volume, you know, there was certain objectives with volume aesthetically that we wanted to make sure that, you know, every screenshot was super readable, that in gameplay, like information was very clear and precise and specific. We also knew the characters. You know, we knew we were going to have Loxley running around. We knew there were going to be some characters who were shown in cutscenes or in kind of menu options. So we knew we had to kind of nail that. And
this was you working with Daz Watford.
That was Daz Watford, yeah, who unfortunately, was unavailable for this project, which we'll work with him again though. But so with that one, you know, I sit down and go, okay, these are the things we need. This is the stuff we have to kind of have from like a functional perspective. You're basically building a shopping list of this is all the stuff that's going to be in the game. And you have some rough ideas, of course, but you basically have no idea what that stuff is going to look like. So that's the point where you get a great concept artist. And yeah, you go through a series of processes. Usually, and you'll have seen this with the stuff you've seen as it goes through, usually there is an ever-increasing level of detail and quality because you're always trading off, you're always trying to work out, like, you want to save money. On a cynical level, you want to make sure that any mistake or wrong direction you go in, that the cost of that and the risk of that is as low as possible, because it allows you to actually be more free, because you can play with lots of ideas. If you accept, and most concept art, in terms of like the stuff we're producing right now, at least 75% of that stuff will be thrown away. Like, it has no functional purpose. But we did it so that we could find the paths not to go down, so we get to the right one eventually.
Can we put it in the art book and at least sell it that way?
You see, that's what you're brilliant at, Alexander. You see the angle. It's good. But yeah, and honestly, a lot of this stage of concept art doesn't make it into the art books. I have a pretty large art book collection, and you flick through like a AAA art book, and you look at it, you're like, that artwork was produced 6 months in. Like there's this kind of more scrappy process right at the start. So what you do is you work out this bio of what the character is and what you need to convey visually, and then you talk to the artist and you give them that kind of direction and kind of what you're going for, and then they go off and do a lot of research often, and will arrive at a design for that character, or actually usually about 10 designs for that character that you then kind of pick. Oh, I like that bit of that, but that doesn't work with that, and you start to kind of zone in.
Well, what I've kind of liked in our conversations about this process is you have a very different mentality than I do when it comes to working with creatives or just given our backgrounds, getting stuff done. Because from a writing background, if something isn't working for me, I generally turn around and express politely what I would like, and make them go do that thing, because I guess writing is just a far more direct conversation.
I think as well, you're a writer. That's the big difference. With me, I'm not an artist. I can't draw for crap. I maybe I could if I went and did the enormous amount of training and learning that these guys do, but no, like my opinion is always, if you're very specific, me and Daz, have worked together for years, and he's always described it with other people he's worked with, that it's being a wrist. If you go to an artist and say, I want you to draw me a red dog that looks a little bit like Pluto, and does this and this and this and this and this, then if it's a good artist, they'll come back and they'll give you that. They'll give you a painting of that, and you'll clap yourself on the back and just feel really proud of yourself. But, that frankly is worse than what they would have given you if you'd said, well, so there's this dog, right? And this dog, like, it's got this emotional history and it's kind of done this, and there's a big, and they might come back to you with a red dog that looks a lot like Pluto, but at least they'll have done it, on a creative level. So it's really comes down to that. And I do that with all of my creative direction, is I hire people who are better than me at everything. And then what I do is I let them know like what I want, but it's much more, it's outcomes led. It's, I want a character that conveys this, rather than I want a character with a yellow hat. And then when they, don't get me wrong, if they bring me something that I don't like, that, that doesn't make it into the game. But 9 times out of 10, they'll come back to me with something better than what was in my head. So it's just how I've kind of come to work.
So you work out a few different ways of this character looking, and those were all in. They were all in black and white. They were definitely sketches, but they were sort of high-end sketches, I guess. They definitely looked good. So what happens after that?
So, usually those at that stage, you kind of you've toned in their sketches. They're usually kind of quite vague in terms of some of their forms. So at that point, it really becomes detail and color. A lot of artists will like to work in grayscale up to a point, because simply it's just one less thing to worry about, right? Like they can work out the big strokes of a character or an environment or a monster or whatever. So often it'll be a case of then, okay, we need to work out what the color scheme is. What's this character? How's this character going to sit color wise?
That part's hard. Like going through that. So for example, one of the things that we had was there's a character that's wearing something that could be construed as working gear or sort of military gear, and the color scheme that we had to dance. Like it's so weird that you don't realize the cliches that we have in video games until you are face to face with someone who's come up with a really good concept, and you've seen it in black and white, and you're like, okay, this is looking pretty original. This is looking pretty good. And then you start coloring it, and you've got like 4 different color options, and 3 of those color options you can totally nail down to 3 different franchises that you know.
Yeah.
And or that you pick out those specific colors, and you're like, oh, that's from this series, or that's from that series. And I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that in the process, that it's sort of like you are trying to give the idea of who this person is, but you are desperately trying to avoid all the cliche and
usually, to be fair, the concept artist will be aware of that. Like, often it's one of the reasons, like, why you don't give super specific direction is that the first things they're going to come back to you with are Master Chief, Killzone, something from Aliens.
But that's what that's what I found so fascinating is that you absolutely saw it with the Mass Effect series, right? Like Mass Effect comes out, and I think you've said that it plays with some 70s,
like 80s more than 70s, but yeah.
Like there's definitely a distinct style to it. And we also saw that with Portal as well. The whites and the blues and the oranges.
Yeah. And
then several years later, you see a movie like the reboot of Total Recall, and you're like, oh wow, those are all Cerberus soldiers.
Yeah.
Like those...
Or Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like it could be Mass Effect the movie, right? Like, yeah, no, it's totally, and these things come and go. And to be honest, as well, sometimes leaning into those fashions is fun. For sure, like Volume definitely has some notes from other games in it. Absolutely, because some things work and some things are useful shorthands or things that you can subvert. To use the Mass Effect example, like Mass Effect, was taking some stuff from like I said, like 80s movies, in the same way as Halo draws heavily on James Cameron stuff, to the extent that then you see Avatar come out and a bunch of YouTube commenters going, oh, it ripped off Halo. And I just sit back at that point and smile at the kind of the beauty of that. That it's all very cyclical, but it's always about putting your spin on it. There's a Mass Effect look because when they went, let's go back to some kind of 70s, 80s sci-fi and take some rhythms from it. They didn't just duplicate. If they just duplicated, that game would look retro to that period, and you just it wouldn't be distinctive. They took something and spun it. So these are the kind of things you find as you go, and you might find. I know with this one, we've there was a specific character who we worked out a color palette we liked for, and then another character is then a reaction to that color palette. You want them to stand out from that first character, and it's all this stuff. Like it's kind of organic and it kind of grows. And yeah, it's a fascinating process, and it's one that it's always a really interesting balancing act. And this goes for kind of production in general, because, with the creative, like art side especially, I'm always balancing like how hands-on do I want to be, because you want people to have the freedom to do the interesting thing on their own without you interrupting. Now, there's definitely professions where that's not the case. Coding, for example, like, no, I'm going to write a 5-page document explaining exactly how I want that button to work, But with artists, yeah, giving them some freedom.
And as a coder listening to this podcast suddenly starts writing that email.
But coders want that. Like, that's the thing is frankly, like, every coder I've ever worked with wants specificity, because there's way less room for interpretation with code. Like, it either works or it doesn't. And, they may have thoughts of, and definitely on Volume, there were times where I'd write the 5-page document and the coder would come back to me and go, I think there's a better solution. And they would be right. But having that very specific direction, I've always found works much better for coders. With an artist, they often want to be kind of let off the leash a bit to do their own thing. But then later, so for example, while we're being very indulgent with the concept art phase, if this is one of the projects that kind of we take forward and turns into a real game, then there's going to be a stage where we have to model that character in 3D, and that's going to have to very specifically fit the concept art. That I can't have the 3D modeler making that character go, yeah, I'm going to kind of loosely interpret the concept art, because at that point it's like, well, why did we? This is where we've kind of landed on. So there's always room. Sometimes there's room for lots of creative decision making. Sometimes
also from
really
a business standpoint, isn't the client or the license holder also, haven't they given approval to that character? So you have to.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the project. So some projects, yeah, if you're working with a publisher or a license holder, then yeah, you've jumped through a lot of hoops, and they will be annoyed if you then kind of change things. But part of that's relationship management as well, that like, you will often do something, you'll write something in a pitch document and then realize, 6 months to 9 months later, oh, that's awful. Like, things in volume, there were definitely mechanics in volume that got removed because they didn't work. And if that had been a project that was kind of funded by a publisher or whatever, then they would certainly have been within their rights to say, well, you said that would be in there. So then it becomes a case of just kind of talking to that person, explaining why that didn't work, and kind of moving on. But yeah, you certainly don't want to do that by accident. It's a much bigger deal. So yeah, there is more flexibility when you're working kind of completely self-funded or funded by someone who doesn't want creative input. But yeah, that varies from project to project.
Yeah, so we're now very close to the end of the concept arting process. So what are the sort of final stages that go into that?
Well, at this stage with this one, because this is something that, as you said, we're kind of preparing pitch documentation for, this is one that ultimately the final product for this mini project is the pitch. So it's the kind of the creation of final assets, which is where we're at now, where, the artist, having kind of arrived upon some decisions for different elements, is now kind of creating incredibly polished, beautiful artwork that can go into documentation and kind of be shared with people. At that point, frankly, this project ends. Like that's how you have to think of, with pitch process, you have to kind of take something to that point. If this project then goes forward and we do this in some way, then we go back into pre-production, and, day one is, okay, so, we arrived upon a lot of these decisions in 2 weeks. What don't we like? What do we want to shift? What do we want to change? What do we have to develop? Because obviously you do very specific work. So while we've designed these 4 characters, there are 20 characters. So you kind of, that's the point where you go kind of into an elongated, more expensive process, which is similar to what we've just done, but kind of in slow motion. It's the equivalent of taking a TV show and making a movie of it. It's a much bigger, expansive, and that would be several months.
And if it doesn't work out, you will accidentally mention it on a YouTube show 3 years from now, and it becomes a news story.
That can also happen. We'll see. These things, yeah, I'm sure one day there's definitely some stuff here that, the team has produced amazing work, and I hope one day we get to share it, even if, but then that's pitching, you do a few things. So the second we've finished this one, we'll be probably playing with a different idea, and, we're doing prototypes for other stuff. We're definitely playing with a few ideas right now, because it's that kind of weird time after a game's shipped where it's, where you're just going, okay, what next?
So as we mentioned, this is an early access episode of the Bithell Games podcast. We don't have a fast and true structure at this stage. So if you have feedback, comments, ideas of where you'd like us to go, feel free to send us an email. That's contact@bithellgames.com, contact@bithellgames, BITHELL games.com. We will take a look at that, try to incorporate some of those ideas, see where we end up, see where we go with this thing, because we know what we want to talk about, but we definitely want an idea of what the audience is interested in where they want us to go, because that's one of the sort of weird things of being in the inside. You don't know all the time what you should be talking about or what people want to hear about. So let us know. That's contact@bithellgames.com. So that's reader mail. If you got a comment about the show, if there's something you'd like us to talk about, or if there's a segment that you would be interested in us taking a little bit of time each week talking about, let us know. Early access. That's what this is all about. So that is our second early access episode of the Bithell Games podcast. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. Thanks for joining us this week. We will be back again next week, or maybe we will be, depending on how iTunes populates this again, we might be 3 episodes on top of each other. This might, we have no idea. So get in the last word, Mike.
Pumpkin.